He didn't want her, not really. She knew it the morning after the wedding. The look in his eyes told her everything. She wasn't the one. She was the trick. Before we dive in, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, what would you do if the person you loved never chose you? The sun beat down on the fields outside Haran, turning the world golden. Two sisters worked side by side, gathering water from the well, but they couldn't have been more different. Rachel, the younger one, moved like she was dancing even when she was working. Every shepherd boy in the region found excuses to water their flocks when Rachel was at the well. Her laugh echoed across the fields. Her beauty was the kind people whispered about. And then there was Leah. Leah with the gentle eyes. The Bible describes her eyes as weak or tender. Maybe they were actually weak, unable to see distant things clearly. Maybe they were a different color. Not the striking dark eyes most valued in that culture. Or maybe they were just sad eyes, already carrying the weight of being the sister no one noticed. Whatever the case, in a world where a woman's worth was measured by her beauty and her ability to bear children, Leah had already learned a painful lesson. She would always be second. "Rachel," their father Laban called from the house, "come help me with these traitors." Rachel flashed a smile at her sister, handed her the water jug, and ran toward their father's voice. Always Rachel, never Leah. Leah adjusted the weight of both water jugs on her shoulders and continued working. She was used to it. This was life in Padan Aram, in the household of Laban, a man known throughout the region for his shrewdness in business. Some called it shrewdness, others called it deception. Leah and Rachel's mother had died years ago. Their father had raised them with a calculating eye, always looking for advantage, for profit, for the next deal. And his greatest asset was Rachel's beauty. Her hand in marriage would fetch a high bride price someday. Leah, she would be harder to marry off. The sisters grew up in this unspoken reality. Rachel, kind in her way, never lorded her position over Leah, but she didn't have to. Everyone else did it for her. As the sun set that evening, Leah sat alone, combing wool while her father and sister entertained guests. Her fingers worked quickly, skilled from years of practice. She was good at many things: cooking, weaving, tending the flocks, the practical things. But who would ever notice that? Everything changed the day Jacob arrived. Leah saw him first, actually, a dusty stranger approaching the well where she was drawing water. Tall, strong, with eyes that seemed to carry both confidence and some hidden pain. "Who is that?" she whispered to herself. But before she could greet him, Rachel appeared with her flock. And in that moment, that one fateful moment that would shape all their lives, Jacob looked past Leah and saw Rachel. The water jug slipped from Leah's hands and shattered on the stones. Neither of them noticed. Jacob rushed forward to help Rachel water her sheep. Their hands touched, their eyes met, and just like that, like something from a story, they connected. Leah gathered the broken pieces of her jug, ignored the water soaking her clothes, and slipped away unnoticed. Later that day, the stranger was welcomed into their home. He was their cousin, it turned out, the son of their father's sister, Rebecca, who had married into a wealthy family in Canaan. "Why have you come so far from home?" Laban asked over dinner. Jacob's face darkened. "I had to leave. My brother Esau wants to kill me." The room fell silent. Even Rachel stopped eating. "I tricked him out of his birthright," Jacob continued, "and then I deceived our father to get the family blessing that should have gone to Esau." Laban's eyes gleamed with newfound respect. A man after his own heart, someone who knew how to get what he wanted. "You've found family here," Laban said, clapping Jacob on the shoulder. "Stay as long as you need." What no one said aloud was what everyone could see. Jacob couldn't take his eyes off Rachel. And Rachel, beautiful, cherished Rachel, couldn't take her eyes off him. Leah sat in the shadows, forgotten as usual, watching the beginning of a love story she would never be part of. Or so she thought. A month passed, and Jacob proved himself invaluable around Laban's homestead. He was strong, clever with the animals, and willing to work hard. "You shouldn't work for nothing," Laban said one evening. "Name your wages." Jacob didn't hesitate. "I'll work for 7 years in exchange for your younger daughter Rachel's hand in marriage." 7 years? That's how much he valued Rachel. 7 years of his life. Laban smiled. "Better you than some other man. It's a deal." Leah, grinding grain nearby, felt her heart sink. Not that she had expected anything different. Not that she had allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, Jacob might look at her the way he looked at Rachel. But hearing it stated so plainly, Rachel was worth 7 years of a man's life. What would Leah be worth? Who would ever work 7 days for her, much less 7 years? The days turn into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. For 7 years, Leah watched Jacob work for her sister's hand. She watched their love grow deeper. She heard their laughter in the fields. She saw their stolen glances at the dinner table. And something complicated grew in her heart. She envied her sister, yes, but more than that, much more powerful than jealousy, she found herself falling in love with Jacob too. How could she not? He was kind when so few men were. He told stories of faraway places. He spoke of God not as a distant power, but as someone who walked with him, who had promised him great things. And he was handsome, so handsome it hurt to look at him sometimes. But Jacob never really looked at Leah, not the way she wanted him to. 7 years passed with agonizing slowness. Leah turned from a young woman into a full adult during those years of waiting, not waiting for her own wedding, waiting for her sister's. Finally, the 7 years were complete. The wedding day arrived. And that's when her father called her into his tent with a plan that would change everything. "You want me to what?" Leah's voice shook as she stared at her father in disbelief. "You heard me," Laban said, not meeting her eyes. "Tonight, you will take Rachel's place as the bride." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and terrible. "But Jacob loves Rachel," Leah whispered. "He worked 7 years for her." "And he'll work 7 more," her father replied with a cold smile. "That's business. In our land, the older daughter must marry first. It's tradition." Tradition. As if he had ever cared about tradition before when it didn't benefit him. "He'll hate me," Leah said, her voice breaking. For a moment, just a moment, something like compassion flashed across Laban's face. Then it was gone. "He'll get over it," he said, "and you'll have a husband, a good provider. That's more than many women get." What he didn't say was clear enough, more than you were likely to get otherwise. "What about Rachel?" Leah asked. "I've already spoken to her," Laban said, turning away. "She understands her duty to this family." Leah doubted that very much, but she knew better than to argue. In their world, daughters didn't defy fathers, not if they wanted to survive. That evening, as the sun set and the wedding feast began, Leah found herself being prepared by the women of the household. They dressed her in Rachel's wedding clothes. They covered her face with a heavy veil, so heavy that no one could see the tears streaming down her cheeks. "Smile," one of the older women whispered. "It's your wedding day." But it wasn't, not really. It was a theft, a deception, and she was part of it. The ceremony passed in a blur. Jacob's voice speaking vows he thought were for another woman. The pressure of his hand on hers. The witnesses clapping and singing. And then they were alone in the marriage tent. In the darkness, with only a small oil lamp casting shadows, Jacob couldn't see her face clearly. He had drunk deeply at the feast, part of her father's plan. His words were loving, meant for Rachel, and each one cut Leah deeper than any knife could. When morning came and sunlight filtered through the tent opening, Jacob rolled over and looked at his bride. His cry of shock and rage echoed across the entire camp. "What is this?" he demanded, leaping to his feet. "Where is Rachel? What have you done?" Leah couldn't speak. What could she possibly say? Jacob stormed out of the tent, still shouting, "Laban, what trickery is this?" Leah curled into herself on the marriage bed, alone with her shame. This wasn't how a wedding night was supposed to end. This wasn't how a marriage was supposed to begin. But it was just the beginning of her story. "You will still have Rachel," Laban told the furious Jacob later that morning. "Complete the bridal week with Leah, and I will give you Rachel too, in exchange for another 7 years of work." Another 7 years. 14 years total for the woman he loved, and 1 week of obligation for the woman he didn't. Jacob agreed. What choice did he have? He had waited 7 years for Rachel. He would wait 7 more. But he wouldn't wait alone. A week after marrying Leah, he married Rachel too. 2 sisters, 1 husband. A recipe for heartbreak. From the beginning, it was clear where Jacob's heart lay. The Bible puts it plainly. Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. More, such a small word for such a vast difference. Leah became the legal first wife, the position that should have carried honor and authority in the household. But what good was being first on paper when she was last in her husband's heart? She shared his name, his tent, his bed, but she couldn't reach his heart. Rachel, on the other hand, had everything Leah wanted: beauty, love, Jacob's tender gaze, everything except one thing: children. Month after month passed, and Rachel's womb remained closed, while Leah's opened. "I'm with child," Leah told Jacob one morning, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. His response wasn't joy, not excitement, just a nod, an acknowledgement. But for the first time since their wedding, he really looked at her, and for Leah, that was something. 9 months later, she gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, which means "see," a son, but also sounds like the Hebrew for "he has seen my misery." As she cradled her newborn, Leah whispered, "It's because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now." Hope, that dangerous, beautiful thing that keeps the wounded heart beating. But Jacob's love didn't come. Leah conceived again, another son. She named him Simeon, which means "one who hears," saying, "Because the Lord heard that I am not loved, he gave me this one too." Still, Jacob's heart remained with Rachel. A third son came, Levi, meaning attached, because Leah said, "Now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons." 3 sons in a world where sons meant everything. 3 sons when the beloved Rachel had none. But it wasn't enough. Something changed in Leah when she became pregnant a 4th time. Maybe it was exhaustion from hoping for what never came. Maybe it was wisdom born of disappointment. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the first glimmer of understanding that there was a love greater and more faithful than any human love could be. When her 4th son was born, she didn't mention Jacob at all. "This time I will praise the Lord," she said, and named him Judah, which means praise. No more desperate hopes that a baby would make her husband love her. No more measuring her worth by Jacob's attention. This time she looked higher, to the God who had seen her all along. Meanwhile, Rachel watched her sister's growing family with increasing desperation. In their world, barrenness wasn't just disappointment, it was shame, failure, an ongoing public humiliation. "Give me children, or I'll die," she cried to Jacob one night. His anger flared, the only time the Bible records him being angry with his beloved Rachel. "Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children?" The rivalry between the sisters intensified. Rachel gave Jacob her servant Bilhah as a surrogate, claiming the children as her own. Not to be outdone, Leah, who had stopped bearing children temporarily, gave Jacob her servant Zilpah. The competition for Jacob's love, for status, for children consumed the household. 4 women, 1 man, and a growing collection of children born of complicated motives. But through it all, Leah was changing. The desperate young bride was becoming something else, a woman who had found a source of identity beyond her husband's approval. The Bible doesn't tell us exactly what transpired in Leah's heart during these years, but something profound was happening. A shift from seeking human love to discovering divine love, from being defined by rejection to being defined by acceptance from a higher source. Years passed, the family grew, Jacob's wealth increased, and one day he announced it was time to return to his homeland in Canaan. Time to face his brother Esau, whom he had cheated so many years ago. Time to claim the inheritance God had promised him. Packing up an entire life isn't easy, especially when that life includes multiple wives, 11 sons, servants, and large flocks of animals. As they prepared to leave Paddan Aram, tension filled the air. Rachel and Leah both had grievances against their father Laban, who had used them as bargaining chips and withheld their dowries. God has taken away our father's livestock and given it to you, they told Jacob, when he explained why they needed to leave secretly. Their loyalty had shifted fully to their husband and their new family. So they left, sneaking away while Laban was busy shearing sheep. Rachel even stole her father's household gods, small idols believed to grant prosperity and legal rights to family property. Leah didn't take anything from her childhood home except memories, mostly bitter ones. And her children, 7 by this point, 6 sons and a daughter named Dinah. As they journeyed toward Canaan, Jacob grew increasingly anxious about facing his brother Esau. The last time they'd seen each other, Esau had been plotting to kill him. When word came that Esau was approaching with 400 men, Jacob prepared for the worst. He divided his family into groups, placing those he considered most expendable at the front, the servants and their children, and those most precious to him at the rear. If Esau attacks one group, he reasoned, the others may escape. Where did he place Leah and her children in this hierarchy of value? In the middle, not the most expendable, but not the most precious either. Rachel and her son Joseph came last, the most protected position, the clearest statement possible about who mattered most to Jacob. Even after all these years, even after all these children, some wounds never fully heal. But the reunion with Esau went surprisingly well. The brothers embraced, tears were shed, forgiveness was offered and accepted. And life in Canaan began. The years passed, filled with triumphs and tragedies. Rachel finally gave birth to a second son, Benjamin, but died in childbirth, her greatest desire becoming her final moment. Jacob was devastated. The great love of his life was gone. He buried Rachel by the roadside near Bethlehem, marking her grave with a pillar that stood for centuries. And Leah? The Bible doesn't tell us exactly when or how she died. Her death didn't merit the same detailed account as Rachel's. But it does tell us one remarkable thing. When Jacob was an old man, he gave specific instructions about where he wanted to be buried. I am about to be gathered to my people, he told his sons. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought along with the field as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried, and there I buried Leah. There I buried Leah. Not Rachel, his great love, but Leah. In death, Jacob chose to rest beside the wife he had never chosen in life. Why? The Bible doesn't explicitly say. Perhaps in his old age, Jacob had come to appreciate Leah's steadfastness. Perhaps he had grown to love her after Rachel's death. Or perhaps he simply recognized what God had always seen, that Leah belonged with the patriarchs and matriarchs of the faith. For in God's grand design, Leah wasn't secondary at all. From Jacob and his wives came the 12 tribes of Israel, the foundation of God's chosen people. Joseph, Rachel's first son, would save the family from famine and become a prince in Egypt. But it was through Leah's son Judah that the most significant promise would be fulfilled. When Jacob blessed his sons before his death, he gave Judah a blessing that echoed through history. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his. From the tribe of Judah came King David, Israel's greatest king. And from David's line, thousands of years later, came Jesus, the Messiah, the Savior of the world. The unwanted wife became the ancestress of Christ himself. In God's upside-down kingdom, the overlooked often become the overcomers. The forgotten become the foundations. The rejected become the cornerstones. Leah, with her tender eyes that shed so many tears, became part of God's tender mercy toward all humanity. We don't know if Leah ever felt fully loved by Jacob. We don't know if she ever stopped comparing herself to her sister. We don't know if she died at peace. But we do know this: God saw her. When no one else noticed, he noticed. When Jacob looked past her to Rachel, God looked straight at Leah. He saw her pain, he heard her cries, he counted her tears. And he didn't just see her suffering, he saw her potential. He saw in her the bloodline that would eventually bring forth the Savior of the world. In the great tapestry of redemption, Leah's thread was never secondary. It was central. The name Leah in Hebrew is related to the word for weariness or exhaustion. It's a fitting name for a woman who spent so much of her life tired of not being enough, tired of not being chosen, tired of coming in second. But God specializes in taking tired, weary souls and giving them rest, in taking the exhausted and giving them strength, in taking the forgotten and making them remembered for all time. Leah's story reminds us that human rejection never equals divine rejection, that our value isn't determined by who chooses us or who overlooks us. It's determined by the God who sees us completely, flaws, strengths, tears, and all, and loves us anyway. Maybe you've felt like Leah, overlooked while someone else gets all the attention. Second choice, second place, second best. The one who does everything right but still doesn't get the love you crave. If that's you, Leah's story whispers across the centuries. You are seen. Not just by people who are as fickle and blind as Jacob was, but by God who sees beyond appearances to the heart, who counts every tear, who hears every prayer, who turns rejection into redemption, who takes what others discard and makes it the cornerstone. Leah never received the fairy tale ending our modern hearts crave. Jacob never had a dramatic realization that he'd been in love with her all along. She never stepped out of Rachel's shadow in his eyes. But she found something better than fairy tale love. She found divine purpose. She discovered that being chosen by God matters infinitely more than being chosen by any human. And in that discovery, a woman once defined by what she lacked became defined by what she gave, to her family, to her people, and ultimately to the world. Leah was never first in Jacob's heart, but she was central to God's plan, and that made all the difference. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more Bible stories that remind us we're all part of a bigger plan. Drop a comment below. Have you ever felt overlooked like Leah? How did God show you that He sees you? Let's talk about it.